How come you don't talk about politics more on your channel? It's a juicy question. Ugh, how do I respond to this? Stop. Stop what you're doing and look around and think about what's going to happen next. If you're about to go through a tough situation, get an old man on your side. An old man has seen worse. Do a mental experiment and imagine for a minute that you were born in the year 1900. I'm here in the stall in the barn where we kept Frank and Beans when they were piglets, and I was going to do my filming in here, but I still think that initially I was worried that it'd be too dark in here even with the light on, and I still think that way. As cool and dramatic as it seems in here, it's still a little bit too dark, a little bit too washed out. Let me move to the other stall. Much better, I think. All right, yo folks, Happy New Year. It's a wet, rainy, cold day here on the Yosted. I was gonna do some brush clearing. I had started to do some brush clearing, but today is not the day for it. And so I think it's a really good time to have kind of my annual check-in in terms of the channel, in terms of my viewers that I value so much, giving you guys an update on where the channel is going. I've got a few questions I'd like to go over, a couple of notes on what I think of the past year, what I think about the coming year, especially now that I've resigned my job, and updates on that, as well as a couple of juicy questions that came in, like why I don't talk about politics and will I start talking about that kind of stuff. So I'll get to all of that stuff, but I just like to start this video by saying thank you again for an incredible year. Last year, as you all know, that are valued members of the Yo family who continue to watch our channel, last year was unique in that I was working a full-time job that often required a lot of travel, and I was doing that for the past year and a half. So it was a year of mostly maintenance and keeping up with things. Obviously, we harvested our pigs, Frank and Beans. We did, I think, 2 turkey harvests this past year. We got a lot out of the garden. So in terms of homestead productivity, it was pretty good. But in terms of like expanding the homestead and growing the homestead and doing new things on the homestead, it was mostly just about maintenance for the past year and a half. Things are gonna change now. Again, I'd like to extend my wishes for a Happy New Year to all of you who watch. Thank you to everyone who's reached out with cards, or with greetings via email. All of that stuff just really, really means so much to us. So let's have a little bit of a farm meeting. Grab yourself a hot mug, if you will, and sit down. And if you are invested in this channel in any way, I think hopefully some of the stuff that we'll talk about today will be of interest to you, and you will know kind of what direction things are going in. So cheers, Happy New Year. Let's get into it. All right, so the very first topic that I wanted to address was the resignation. Now, as a lot of you know, long story short, my full-time job that I work from home doing, gave me an ultimatum recently, last month, where they essentially said, you will need to move and start going into an office if you want to continue with your current position, going physically into an office. What that would mean would be moving. And let's get real, what that would mean would be probably selling the homestead. It's a tough decision to make. That job obviously provides for my family, so I essentially needed to choose, okay, do I keep the homestead, or do I move and keep this career that I'm in, keep this job that I'm in? And so ultimately, as you guys know, I decided to resign, and I officially resigned last month, a few weeks ago. And it's been an amicable split, so I want to say that right off the bat. There's no bad blood, there's no anger between me and my employer. That's their business, that's how they want to run it. our goals aren't aligned. So I moved in one direction and they moved in the other direction, and it's been good. It's been a friendly split. I hope to maintain relationships with the people that I worked with. So let's get into some of the nitty gritty. My last official day working there, I'm still working full time until the end of January. January 31st is my last official day there. And until then, I'm still working full time. I'm trying to create a transition program for people that will be there after me, to make it smooth on them. And there is a chance that I'll be able to continue working at this company in kind of a freelance contract role, part-time thing. It certainly wouldn't be full-time. It definitely wouldn't take nearly as much time as it currently does. I wouldn't need to travel. I could remain where I am. It would be similar to what I was doing when I started the channel. I was doing a lot of freelance work. It'd be very similar to that. I would be essentially just taking on that as another source of revenue. So that's the very first thing that I wanted to talk about was what's the scoop? Where are we? Where are we standing in terms of the job? That's where we stand. My last day is January 31st. So the question I've been getting from a lot of people, and one person, I don't know if she wants me to share her name in the video itself, but I'll show you the body of her question. I'll keep it up here on screen for a minute so you can read it. And I think it's a really, really good question. I wrote down some of the beats for it. I don't have the verbatim question to it, but it kind of encapsulated a lot of questions that I've been getting from my viewers, which is essentially, it boils down to, okay, you've resigned, what now? You're done there, what now? We want to see some stuff, we want to see some content, we want to see some expansion, we want to see some growing. And I think the gist of her question was, are you going to continue in maintenance mode and, find another job? Or are you going to, dive right in full-time homesteading? If I messed up the nature of the question, please forgive me. But I think that's the general thrust of her question. She articulated it pretty well. But like I said, the baseline of it is what now? What are you going to do next? So there's a couple of things that I think are worth discussing here with you, my viewers, and anyone interested in this lifestyle. In my previous video, I said that homesteading, I don't want to say that there's a misperception of it because of YouTube channels, but I think a lot of people don't realize that there's an all-in element to this lifestyle. And that's not just with time, but that's with money. Building infrastructure, getting equipment, bringing in animals, building fencing, all of that stuff is not cheap. It's I don't want to say it's expensive. You can be thrifty. You can buy used things. You can rent things, but it's not cheap. Once you get an infrastructure established, you can stretch it and you can do all sorts of things to keep it going and keep it self-sustaining. Much like what I talked about in the last video. I don't want to dive right back into that discussion, but that's on the one hand, it's not cheap, but on the other hand, it requires so much time. If you want to dive fully into homesteading and make a living from it, so in other words, make some sort of product derived from animals that you raised or plants that you grow or other jobs that you do around the homestead or skills that you've acquired on the homestead, that will require a lot of time. It's hard to find a balance between those two things. What we see in a lot of YouTube channels are families and individuals that have done an incredible job of balancing those two very challenging bipolar opposites. You need a lot of money, you need a lot of time. There are loopholes, there are ways to get around it, there are ways to stretch things, there are ways to do things on a budget. But in general, those are the two things that you really need. You need a lot of money and you need a lot of time. And there are very popular channels on YouTube that have done an incredible job of getting to where they're going and showing you how they've maintained a really thriving homestead where they've grown and they've built infrastructure and they do it full time. I'm thinking of channels like, the OG, Justin Rhodes. I had a chance to meet Justin Rhodes several times. It's where I met my friend Nate, was at Justin Rhodes' farm a couple years back. He's kind of the OG where he does this full time and he kicks butt doing it. He does such a great job, and he's an inspiration to millions of people. And he makes, I would assume, he makes a lot of money doing it. There's a lot of other channels that do this. So The Land, Roots and Refuge, there's a lot of people that inspire me, that I look up to, and they do it full time. And like I said, my assumption is that they make a lucrative career from it. I'm not going to make assumptions as to what people make, but that's the assumption. They're able to do it full time, and they're able to grow their homestead and create a large infrastructure doing it. And they're so inspirational to me. And so the question, I read this question that came to me is like, do you want to take that leap? Do you want to try and join that echelon? And become a full-time homesteader and record and do it on YouTube. And the answer is complicated, because on the one hand, yeah, who wouldn't love to do something like that? Man, I'd love to, like, that's my career, is I just do YouTube videos twice a week, and I get crazy infrastructure and grow the homestead and do awesome things with it. I would love that, man. I would jump at the opportunity to do that. The question is, can I? And I have a family to think about. Is this a wise leap for me to make with a family in tow? Yes, I'm a YouTube channel, and in many ways a YouTube channel is a kind of business. You need to think of your customers. You need to think of the people you care about, the people that are watching with you and are in a way extended family, and creating a good experience for them. But you also need to think about your family. In my case, I need to think about my family. If I can create a world where, similar to what I had set up previously before I started my full-time job, where I'm bringing in revenue through something part-time, if I can create a world where I'm doing that, the answer to that question, the answer to the comment that was left, again, I'm not sure if she wants me to repeat her name, but I thank her for asking that, because it's a really good one. The answer to that question is, yes, I'd like to try to expand. Yes, I'd like to try and start making money from endeavors that I've started on my own homestead. Is the goal to be self-sustaining? Absolutely it is. We've done a pretty good job over the past 2 years of deriving a large percentage of our food from things that we've raised or grown on the homestead. We've raised 3 different types of meat animals: meat chickens, turkeys, and pork pigs. We've done that, and I intend to do all 3. I'd like to focus on turkeys next, and then probably get into smaller pigs again. And one day, as everyone that knows me, that watches my channel, knows that I'm really interested in sheep. If not this coming year, then the year after. So I've got experience with chickens of all kinds, of turkeys and pigs. I'd like to continue that. We also grew a lot of our food. Our garden was thriving last year. One of the things that's important if you're growing your own food is to create some kind of starch. And for us, that was sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes grow well here. And so we had a bumper crop of sweet potatoes. We're still going through our sweet potatoes. So let me back up. I think we've done a pretty good job of creating a system where we can raise most of our own meat, and we can grow most of our own plants. I'd like to continue that. Would I like to expand it and get into some of the things that the commenter mentioned, like, there's a barn roof to fix, there's gravel to put on the driveway, there's all sorts of projects. When you live in a homestead, there's all sorts of expensive projects that you need to take on. I'd like to take those on in the coming year. A lot rides on whether or not my part-time job situation pans out the way I hope that it does. More to come at the end of this month, but I think we'll be going in that direction. So, great question. I think that's the main question on everyone's mind, is like, well, what next? Somebody asked me, I think this was another question, why isn't your channel growing? You seem to have stayed relatively stagnant. I've got my theories for that, but I think it ties into the first question. If your homestead isn't growing, in this niche, in this genre of homestead stuff, if your homestead isn't growing and you're not doing lots of projects, I'm not sure if if your channel will grow. I myself like to watch channels where people are doing big projects and they're getting stuff done. And that hasn't been the story of our homestead. Like I said, we're a family, and we're just showing you our lives here on the homestead. And that, for the past year and a half, that hasn't been the story. It hasn't been a story of growth. It's been a story of maintenance. I would like that to change, and I have a good feeling that it will in the coming year. So, but with that being said, I love doing this. I love making these videos, and I love connecting with you guys. You guys, like I said, are my friends, an extended family. I've made so many friends and good relationships with all of you that I'm going to keep doing this. Whether 10 people watch a video or 10,000 people watch a video, to me, I'm past the point of really tuning into that terribly much. I'm going to keep doing it no matter what. That being said, I'd like to grow the channel. Obviously, who wouldn't? But I do this because of the love. Another question that came up: you used to do 2 videos a week. Are you going to go back to 2 videos now that you've resigned? That's a good question. I don't know. One thing to say about my videos, I think maybe I take my videos a little too seriously. Sometimes I really put a lot of effort into editing them. Sometimes I just don't have the time, especially working full-time job, and I've got an hour to film something and an hour to edit something. So it's not ideal. But when you do this, for me, coming up with an idea, like a story of something I want to film and a project I want to take on, and then I edit myself. There are people I know that hire out editing, and that may be something I'll look into. I enjoy editing. I like the editing process, but every week it's like you have to make a movie. You've got to put a movie together, storyboard, concept, script. If I'm doing a voiceover, I want to make sure I write something really cool. Filming, editing it, all of that stuff. Like I said, you're putting a movie together, and that's a lot of work. That being said, before I got into this job, there was a time, I'm not sure if you guys remember, where I was doing Work With Me Wednesdays, where I would just put a camera up while I was doing chores or basic projects around the homestead, and it seemed to get a pretty good reaction. I think people really liked those videos. They didn't really take a lot of time for me to edit, and they weren't really intrusive. I usually wasn't talking. I was just doing something, a project I would be doing anyways on the homestead. I just stuck the camera up. If you guys are interested in me continuing that once I enter my new life post January 31st, please let me know, because there's a part of me that really liked those videos. Yes, I like connecting with you and having the verbal narrating what I'm doing, but there's the other part of me that just really likes sticking a camera up and no music, very little editing, and you just tagging along to see what I'm doing. That would be in addition to kind of a regular narrated video every week. Again, I'm not quite sure how it'll pan out. My priority is my family. My priority is making sure my family's provided for. But if I have the time that I think I might be able to, then that might be an option. So good question, and one that the answer is maybe. I really enjoy doing those Work With Me Wednesday videos, those silent, just working videos. Next question was emailed to me. Sean, you can sometimes be vague in terms of the plans that you have and the projects that you want to take on. Do you have a solid idea of the things you'd like to take on in 2024? Great question. Thank you for emailing that to me. And yes, I can be vague. And to be honest with you, that's because I really didn't know what kind of time I had when I was working my full-time job. I will have a better picture of the time that I'll have available to me in the coming year. So I'll start with the basics of the things I'd like to take on for 2024. So winter is unique in that everything's dead and there's really not much going on. There's no garden to tend to. The only animal I have at the moment is laying chickens. It's a good time to stop what you're doing and look around and think about what's going to happen next. Just stop. And so that's what I'm doing right now. And so I'll start with the basics that I know I want to get done. So the projects I do want to take on: brush clearing. Dad and I have done quite a bit of work clearing the brush. We'd like to continue that. There are certain patches of land that I'd like to continue doing. A great candidate for Work With Me Wednesday type videos. Kick back, get yourself your hot beverage, and just watch me clear some land. That's going to be a big thing in this coming month and the next month, is clearing land. Our acreage, our 11 acres, we have kind of our home acre footprint, but there's stuff that we'd like to do beyond that. And so I'd like to look at clearing some of the land some more. Clean up the garden, get ready for the next growing season. As I mentioned in a previous video, we'd like to start as many of our plants from seed this year. Hasn't been something we've traditionally done. We've mostly gone in and bought starts from local nurseries, which is fine. I like supporting them, these local nurseries. We love to support them, but it's not, sweet potato slips alone, I can't remember what we paid the last time for each tray of slips. It wasn't cheap. And so now we've got the opportunity to start a lot of the stuff from seed on our own. I'd like to start a very robust seed program this year. So that's one thing I'm very, very much looking forward to in 2024. We had that gifted greenhouse, which we're going to use. And thank you to everyone that gave me some really great tips on use of that greenhouse. And so I'm excited about the seed program. So that's one, or that's two actually. So clearing land, seed starting program. The next one is an incubation program. So I want to take the next step and start just breeding out our own chickens, our own laying chickens. We may start laying our own meat chickens, although the thing about incubating your own chickens is you're going to end up with a lot of roosters. So I may just use roosters as my meat chickens. And then turkeys. So I want to start incubating chickens and turkeys this year. First thing, clearing out land. Second thing, starting our own seeds. Third thing, incubation program with not just chickens, but turkeys as well. Those are the big projects that come to mind right off the bat that I want to just hit the ground running here very soon on all four of those projects. Some other things to note, obviously, we love pork. Frank and Beans, bless their hearts, peace be upon them. We're still eating their meat. We thank them for the sacrifice they made for the wonderful meat. But they were big boys, and they did a lot of damage to the land, even when we moved them very regularly. And I know old-time homesteaders are looking at me like, oh, what do you expect? And you can do this, and you can do that. I know, I get you. But I think one thing that we may do is look into a smaller breed of pig. My buddy Sang from Growing Little Country Homestead does, or has done coonies. And I think So the Land's done coonies. They're smaller pig. And for a family of 3, as well as, feeding Nana Jana and my parents, I think getting a handful of coonies would be something I'm a little bit more interested in. I don't know much about coonies. I've talked about them in the past videos. I want to learn more, and if there's an opportunity to start with coonies this year, I think I would get into that opportunity. Sheep is a one-day thing. I want to learn more from my buddy Nate about their sheep experience. If there was an opportunity this year, I don't know if we'd take it, but definitely next year. I'm really excited about sheep one day. I love lamb. I love mutton. So sheep is a maybe for sure. And then the tractor, I want to continue tinkering with the tractor. I found myself really enjoying tinkering with the tractor and troubleshooting it. And when it has problems, figuring out what those problems are and fixing them. And it's been a fun little toy to play with, but we need to have it start doing some real work. Okay, here's a fun one. Jean, politics are extremely important nowadays. The world has gone crazy. Can you agree? Yes, I can agree. How come you don't talk about politics more on your channel? That was the whole question. It was emailed to me. Thank you. It was a good question. And it's a question I get sometimes. And, it's a juicy question. How do I respond to this? Let me start by saying that there are certain channels that do that kind of subject matter really well. A lot of channels I really like. And I can't look you in the eyes and say that I don't have my own political beliefs or my own political ideas. I do, of course, everyone does. So how come I don't talk about it more? Especially given, kind of the nature of what we do. Honestly, the answer isn't all that complicated. I don't feel like I articulate it well. I don't feel like I expound upon my positions that well. I don't really think my channel, the type of content that I focus on, is focused on that. It's not something that I really want to focus on. Does that mean it's not important? Of course it doesn't mean that. Of course it's important. And like I said, there are channels that talk about it and fold it into their content very well. And I'm certainly not knocking those channels. I like a lot of those channels. I had somebody send me, it was a blog post or something recently, really made me think. So to the second point of the question, the world is crazy right now. Things are going nuts. Yeah, things are going bonkers. But somebody sent me this, like I said, I think it was a blog post or something, where it said, do a mental experiment. And imagine for a minute that you were born in the year 1900. Say you lived to 75 years old. Think about the span of your life and the things that you saw over the course of your life from 1900 to 1975. Think about how scary the geopolitical events were and how nuts everything was that was happening. Think about all of that. As a teenager, you saw World War I and how many millions of people died during that event, and how extremely wacky the geopolitical corridors were in Europe. A little bit after that, there was the Spanish flu and how many millions of people died in that situation. And then just move it out a little bit further. You're just a little bit older, and the Great Depression, the worst financial disaster in history. This is all in the first half of your life. You've seen this horrifying war. You've seen this horrifying plague, and then you've seen the worst financial disaster in history, all within the first half of your life. Go a little bit further out, you're getting into middle age. World War II. Millions of more people are dying. The nuclear bomb. Think about that. You're in your 40s, and in your short life, look at all those things that you've seen and how crazy the world is. And you didn't even have social media or the comforts that we do now to commiserate about it. You had to oftentimes suffer in a really rough way. Keep going a little bit further. You get into the nuclear crisis in the early 60s. You get to the assassination of JFK. You get to the Vietnam War. And by the time you get to 75 or 80, take a look back on your life and see how wild events were in your lifetime and how scary things were. And so I don't know who wrote that particular blog post, but I'd like to give them credit because it really made me think a lot. When I look at how crazy things in the world are and how scary things can seem, sometimes that's a good reminder, a good perspective for me to keep in mind. Is like, think about like what my grandpa went through. My grandpa was born in 1916. Think about all the things that he saw, how freaky that must have been and how uncertain things must have been for so long. Does that negate the seriousness of the things that are happening now? Of course it doesn't. But it is food for thought when you think that your time in history is unique in being freaky. It's probably not. We've seen a lot of scary things. Somebody told me something once that I want to put this in a video somewhere because it's funny, but it's also true. And basically he said, if you're about to go through a tough situation, get an old man on your side. An old man has seen worse. I'll always remember that little nugget. An old man has seen worse. An old person has seen a lot worse. So think about your grandparents, the things that they saw. That leads back to the question, why don't I talk about politics on my channel? Why don't I bring up social events? And the short answer is because I don't want to. I just don't feel like it. I've got my own opinions. Everyone does. But I enjoy a place away from that. Doesn't mean it's not something I think about. It doesn't mean it's not something that I have my own thoughts and actions on. But in terms of this channel, I just don't want to touch it. And that's just how it is, and that's how it will continue to be. So I think those were the primary questions that I wanted to tackle today. I could just keep talking, guys. I'm not going to do that. Those are the main questions that I wanted to tackle today. Where we've been and where we are going, where we're planning to go, God willing, in 2024. I'd like to thank you guys again for hanging out with us, for sticking with us all this time. It's been a year of maintenance, 2023 has, and now that it's over in a lot of big ways, and now that I'm moving on from my full-time job, I'm very excited. And like I said, there's already those 4 or 5 projects on the docket for me right away that I'm really excited to jump into. I'm not going to stop doing this. I love this. So until we see you again next time, Happy New Year. And remember, as always, slowly.